She was the first student to raise her hand to answer the question, but the teacher deliberately ignored her. He chose a boy who raised his hand later, and the boy's answer was inaccurate. Ruth raised her hand again. This time the teacher was a little surprised. He finally called her name. Ruth stood up quickly. She answered the question in detail and accurately, but the boy was not convinced, and tried to interrupt her. But Ruth didn't back down.
If I may finish?
She gave a perfect answer. All the students were shocked. The class became silent, in spite of her outstanding performance, but the teacher would not reward her.
That an answer, Mrs. Ginsburg, or a filibuster?
This is Harvard Law School in 1956. There were only 9 women in the 500-strong freshman class. This was supposed to be a sign of progress for women, but when Ruth enrolled, she realized there was discrimination against women everywhere. The smart girls often chose to cling to men in order to survive and adapt to their environment, but Ruth was stubborn and didn't want to bow down to the pressure, and she didn't want to hide her talent. At the welcome dinner for the new students, the haughty dean asked a question to the women in the audience.
Why you're occupying a place at Harvard that could have gone to a man?
A question that was clearly biased and dismissive of women, although all the girls felt offended. But everyone tried to maintain their dignity. They didn't let their emotions get out of control. But Ruth's heart burned with defiance.
My husband Marty is in the second year class. I'm at Harvard to learn more about his work, so I can be a more patient and understanding wife.
It was an obvious taunt. Everyone in the room heard the meaning of Ruth's words. The dean's face instantly turned pale, but they would never have guessed that this petite girl would become the second female justice in the history of the United States. Her appearance not only broke the gender barrier, she paved the way for countless women to achieve success and equality. But her journey was full of ups and downs and challenges. Shortly after enrolling in school, Ruth's husband was diagnosed with cancer. The chances of survival were only 5%, despite the odds, but she wouldn't give up. From then on, Ruth's life got busy. After finishing her classes every day, she'd rush to her husband's classroom to take notes on his lessons, and then she'd go home and tell her sick husband about it. When the baby cried, she had to be patient and put her to sleep. When the daughter and husband are asleep, she finally found time to finish her studies. Luckily, her work paid off. Ruth's husband gradually recovered. He even got a job at a prestigious law firm in New York, although Ruth's academic achievements were outstanding. But in order to take care of her family, she applied to the dean to transfer to Columbia University to continue pursuing her dream of becoming a lawyer. A few years later, she graduated first in her class, with a doctorate from one of the world's top schools. She could have easily joined any top law firm, but surprisingly, she was rejected by 12 law firms, and all the reasons pointed to one unacceptable reality. It was simply because she was a woman. As Ruth stood in the bustling streets, a sense of doubt and loss washed over her. Was it true, as the professor had said, that she was occupying a place that had always been considered a man's? Ruth had no choice but to take a job as a law professor at the university, and put her dream of becoming a lawyer in the hands of her students. 11 years passed, and during those long years, her husband had become a highly regarded attorney. He had achieved a great deal, but when Ruth attended her husband's celebrations, she found it difficult to join in the joyous and enthusiastic atmosphere. She didn't want to chat with the women, nor could she discuss current legal issues with the men. She could only watch in silence as her husband, surrounded by the crowd, as he confidently expressed his opinions, as if he were a rising star, although she was proud of his accomplishments. But when people praised her for marrying a good husband, Ruth felt a strange sense of loss. She knew she was capable of shining just as brightly, but the reality was that she had to rely on her husband's light. This feeling of helplessness and resignation echoed in Ruth's heart for a long time. It became an indelible mark in her heart. On her way home, Ruth's inner depression finally exploded. She lost control of her emotions and showed her true feelings at that moment. In the face of her wife's sudden emotional outburst, her husband didn't say a word of blame. Instead, he quietly prepared a legal case for her. But this seemingly ordinary case changed her fate forever.